So the very next morning, I started going to meetings, and I walked in, and I always talk about this guy that I saw that had a spider web tattoo on his head, and he looked really
You're like, my
scary. And
people.
yeah, I'm like, I don't belong. I'm in my little Juicy Couture like velvet track suit thing, and I just remember thinking, this is hell. I don't belong here. And then that man started talking. And I just sat there and these big hot tears just started going like this. And he spoke my life.
And here we are with Dana. I'm really
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
well, thanks for coming on and being willing to share your story. And we go way back.
Yeah, we have a
I don't,
history.
we have history. So I
It's
got
mostly me
sober.
stalking you, but that's okay.
You know what? That's
Not in
what
a
we have
bad
to
way.
do. I've stalked a lot of people myself, and we're in the
Yeah,
same industry.
yes. In the
Uh,
writer's world, you have to stalk people. And
yes.
Stephanie was extremely kind to me. Anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself, but with my first book, she was willing to blurb it for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was so excited. So,
And so, which one was your very first book, though? Was Bottled
okay.
your first book?
Bottled, yes, Bottled. It's called Bottled, A Mom's Guide to Early Recovery, and it was a book that I wrote about helping moms understand that they can do this gig with little kids and still be sober, which at the time, Facebook especially was like taking off. And the mom wine thing culture was really taking off. And so I kind of pushed, well, I didn't kind of, I pushed back against that and said, this is BS. Like, can we cuss on the show?
Of
This is
course.
bullshit.
Yeah. Fuck
Bullshit.
yeah.
It's all bullshit. And the wine culture thing really pissed me off because I bought into it for a long time and loved it because it was giving me an out to drink as a mom. And then when I got sober, I was like, oh my God, I totally had drunk the Kool-Aid, literally and figuratively. And I know I want to write about it. So that was Bottled.
Well, let's backtrack just to your early drinking. Was it always a problem? Did it become more of a
Right.
problem after you had kids? Like, I want to hear
Yeah.
the story.
Okay. Well, I was born as a small child. Let me go back a little bit into my childhood. I was born in the burbs in the Midwest and to a typical traditional white family, mom and dad. My mom and dad are still together, and everything on the surface looked, I mean, we were the typical, it was just really much the 80s. I was an 80s child. And on the surface, it all looked great, but my dad was in recovery and he had gotten sober when I was around 2 years old. And I don't want to, my dad knows that I do these podcasts and he knows that I talk about him. So it's okay to say this. I think dad was, in the early years, a bit of a dry drunk, which is a term that we use, we alcoholics, we have all of our little phrases, that we use for people who are in recovery but are still maybe suffering in some ways that they're still working through stuff. So dad was an angry dad and I love him to pieces, but it was a challenging childhood in that sense. But again, on the surface, it all looked good. And what I always say is I learned from early on that love was a currency. It was you did stuff for love. You had to perform well for love, and if you did, which I was a straight A child, I was a neurotic mess. I had to be first chair in band. I had to get all the A's. I mean, I had straight A's in college. Who does that? Like, why? Why would you do that to
That's
yourself?
funny because my daughter's in college right now and she's a very good student. And
Yeah.
I don't say it to her, but in my mind, I'm like, why?
Get the B, please.
Who cares?
I am an advisor. My day job isn't as an advisor to freshmen at a college in my town, and I tell them these little messes of children that come in that are really high achieving. I'm like, get a B. Just get one B so you can like get it over with and know that you're not going to die. So that was me. I felt like I would die if I got a B. And I was raised with the mindset, I was wired to just think the better I do at life and the more perfect I am, the more lovable I am. And I really need you to love me because I was a codependent mess. And pretty much all throughout my 20s and even in college, I did not drink problematically. I had had it pounded into me by my dad, 50% of the children of alcoholics become alcoholics themselves. And as a good daughter, I was very like, yes, dad. But I drank, I partied, but never like blackouts, never horrible. In fact, I've been listening to your podcast and I keep thinking like, I don't have this crazy, um, awful, there's a chapter in Bottled called I
Can
Never Danced on Tables.
can you hold on for 1 second? I'm so
Yes.
sorry. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
My dog is going crazy. I have to put her on a bed. Hold
Oh,
on.
okay. That's
So
okay.
sorry. My dog is nobody's home with me right now to watch her, and she's senior dog with dementia.
Oh, bless your
Yeah,
heart.
I know. Okay,
Oh,
here we go.
okay.
Hold on. Okay, so you never danced on
I
tables.
never danced on tables. And in the chapter, I kind of rue the day. I was like, damn, why didn't I like go to Vegas and like get a tattoo on my throat and do all this stuff? I didn't. I was really into appearances, and you'll hear that throughout this interview. I was all about making sure that Dana on the outside was perfect in every way. And I drank wine and I in my 20s especially, oh God, I thought I was the coolest thing. Martinis, all of it, and it was all about the appearances. And then I would go home and drink my face off while I was alone. And so it was in my 20s really that some red flags started to appear. In fact, I'll never forget, I was living in an apartment with my best friend, my bestie, and one night she came home and I was just a typical night. I was a teacher, I was on all day, very much into being on, being the show, being the best teacher ever, right? And then I would come home and I always liken it to those people with the spinning plates, I spin the plates all day and then I would just let them crash, take off the bra, get a glass of wine, and lay down on the couch and then just keep drinking. And she came home one night and the apartment's dark and I'm on the couch with a glass of wine, and she's like, Dana, this isn't right. Like, you shouldn't be drinking by yourself. And I was so shocked. I wasn't even mad. I was more like, it's a problem to drink by yourself. Like, that's the only kind of drinking I like. If I'm out and about, I will drink definitely. But the best stuff for me, the real hookup, is me and my couch. Like, just so I could let go of that mask that I'd been wearing all day and really, you know, let it all out. But it was wine, right? In fact, I had this theory. I deserve it. It's just wine. I just remember those two phrases going through my head. I deserve it. It's been a long day. I deserve it. It's just wine. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. So I kept doing that through my 20s and my 30s. But there were never, I remember looking back through my journals, especially when I got early sober. I was looking back through some of my old journals, and every once in a while I would say something like, I got rid of all the liquor in the house, or I really need to cut down on my drinking. But it was never enough to really I never took it seriously. In fact, I prided myself on being really smart, right? I was this super smart, straight A kid. So I thought I was smarter than it. Even then, my dad had told me, I'm like, I can handle this. Like, I can handle everything else in my life. I was the first person in my graduating group to get a job, and I have my own house, and I'm just, tripping through life in my heels and doing great. And so, of course, I can handle drinking. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, all of which are red flags because whenever you start thinking about your drinking a lot and thinking it's not a big deal, that's usually when it's kind of indicating that that's a problem, right?
Right.
It's like when the women who would come to me after I got sober and I started talking and speaking about it, and they would come to me and they would say like, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I keep thinking about it, but I don't really know. Can you tell me? And I would always say, if you're thinking about it and that question keeps coming to you, then there are some signs there. Like you need to pay attention to that. But I never did. I
It's
ignored
so
it.
easy to rationalize anyway, because, I
Yeah.
tell a story in my book about taking those 20 questions. I took a
Oh my
online
God, yes.
quizzes
Yes.
constantly.
Flunked it all. Flunked it
Every
all.
single time, but I would
Uh-huh.
every question I would be like, well, that's crazy. That's
Uh-huh.
a high expectation that people like. Of
Yeah.
course I have blackouts, like, but that's stupid. So I'm going to skip that one.
That's not a
Everybody
big
does.
deal. Like, yeah, I flunked it all and I would take those tests. Am I an alcoholic? That's what it was. Am I an alcoholic? This was back in the day when computers were fairly, I mean, I'm totally aging myself here. But I would learn how to Google it and then I'd start taking those tests and I'd just flunk it all. But then I'm like, well, they're too harsh. They're too strict. Like, this is dumb. And it's just wine and I deserve it. It's been a hard day.
I
That's
had the
always
thing
what I said.
too of like, well, I don't do whatever the thing is that I answered yes to. I was like, well, I don't, it's not every day that that
Exactly.
happens
It's not
though.
every
It's like, do you
time.
drink in the morning? And my honest thought process, even though it sounds funny, would be like, well, I don't think brunch counts as the morning.
Yeah.
Like, it's 11 a.m., but I'm not like waking up with the shakes and like doing
Right.
a shot. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm not that bad. Or
I am
have you ever
not, yeah.
missed time from work? I was like, well, one time, like a couple times I've been really hungover and I had to go home from work because I was sick. But
Yeah.
it's not like I
Missing
got
time.
fired,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Oh, I know. I was high. I mean, oh gosh, I'm blanking out. What do we call ourselves? We're the ones that are like the
High
high achieving
functioning,
al yes,
high
high achieving
functioning.
alcoholics is what I call us. And I was so high functioning that I was really doing well in my career as a teacher. I don't know if you could even say that. It's like teachers all of a sudden are like the up and comers. We were not. But I was really doing well. I was enjoying my job and
What grade were you teaching?
I taught high school English for years and years and years. Yes, loved it. Loved it. It's the best gig ever.
I
Um,
love high school English
I
teachers.
love high school English teachers. We're the best. It's just a blast. It was a blast. But I worked really hard at it and I just made sure I was just on and in charge and doing all the teacher of the year stuff that I could. And I just felt like I've got a great job. I've got a car. I've got a house. I mean, I owned up my own house in my 20s. I was doing fine, I thought. And this is the thing that I wanted to say because I know that a lot of people have stories where their reality is punctuated like by really big lows, like big stories of big exciting things that happened to them where they got arrested or they got, thrown in jail or they got the tattoo on their neck and they don't remember it. I don't. My story is kind of boring in the sense that it's just, I don't want to say boring, but it's just this woman who by slow degrees, like the frog in the pot of water that slowly turns up warmer, by slow degrees allowed herself to slip into full-on addiction. But it's not as glamorous, I guess, as doing coke. I was listening to Lisa Smith because I love her and I love her book so much. But I was sort of like bummed, like I'm like, damn it. Why didn't I do coke? I should have tried that. Like, no, it's a different story, but I still feel like telling these stories. I mean, and obviously my stories were important enough to be made into some books that they ring a bell for women and we all have different stories, but the undercurrent is all the same and I love that. I love that.
I
So,
mean, I remember feeling as a newly sober person, just this
yeah.
weird competition of like, these
Yes.
are these are not my people,
Yeah.
or like this person is way worse than me, or this person is
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
nobody, even though I felt like just a piece of shit and I was full of shame when I got sober. But as
Yep.
time wore on and I heard other people's stories, it
Yeah.
really started to creep in that, like, oh, hell, I was not that bad. And for
Yeah,
a while,
yeah.
that thought creeps into your brain where you're like, well, I'm definitely not as bad as a lot of these people in recovery. I don't have to be here. I chose to get sober.
Yeah.
I never had like a proper intervention. I
Yeah, I
wish there
didn't
were
either.
stronger signs that I really couldn't handle my alcohol, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And the thing is, recovery is about so much more than the alcohol. Like it's about so
Yeah.
much more. It's about our whole thinking process. And it took women's stories like yours. Every time I heard a story from somebody else who was like, I don't know, I never got the tattoo, I never got arrested, because that was my story too. Never
Yeah.
went to rehab, never got
I didn't
arrested,
either. I didn't
never
either.
had the shakes in the morning. I don't relate
Mhm.
to Lisa's story either, but I relate to the feelings. And at
Yeah.
some point, which I want to
Yep.
know, what was your lowest point? What was that point where you were like, I
Yeah.
got to make the change? Because at some point, no matter how high our bottom is, it has to be low enough for us to go, this is worth going through the pain of not
Yeah.
having this comfort. So what was
I'm gonna
yours?
do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and my low point was simply sitting in a chair one day and watching my kids play and realizing that I wanted to die. And my kids were little. They were probably 2 and 3. And I was sitting in this chair and I was hungover, desperately hungover, because at this point, we're kind of fast forwarding here. And I'll go back and explain how it got to that level. But I was looking at them and I was planning in my head because I'm a control freak, right? And a perfectionist. I was planning or thinking of women in our neighborhood or town. I was like, who would Brian marry? Who can I find for him so that he'll be set up after I die? Because that was where I was. I was miserable. And I also knew,
What was the miserable part though? Were you depressed? Did you
yeah.
hate being like a mom of little kids, which
Ah, yes. Let me go back. So
please, please
yeah,
don't
I do.
skip.
This is what I tend to do. I mean, thank God I write books because in the books they're usually more chronological and I can go back and fix it. But when I talk, I'm like, "Pa-ching, pa-chow, pew, pew." But okay, so my 20s and 30s, not horribly problematic. But then I got married and then I moved and I quit my beloved teaching job and moved to another teaching job, all of which are high stressors, right? And then I had babies because we got married when we were like 37, I think, Brian and I, so we are basically dead. We joked that we went down the aisle with like our walkers, like we're so old.
And now
We
you look back and you're like, I was so young. I
I was
say
so
I got married at
young.
the same age. Yeah.
Yes, like in it, but I mean, we had bought into the myth that you have to get married, younger, and it's not necessarily true. We really benefited actually from waiting and getting married at a later age, both of us. But at any rate, I did have kids fairly soon because I didn't want to have kids when I was like 40, I don't know, 45 or whatever. That would just be awful. So instead I had kids at 38 and 40. And I remember my doctor saying, "You're a geriatric pregnancy." I was so offended by that. And this is the weird part because this is when I say a couple things that maybe moms won't agree, all moms won't agree with, but that's fine. I don't care anymore because I'm menopausal and I don't care what people think. One, I didn't really want to have kids. I just knew that we should have kids. Okay. So I was a little freaked out about that whole prospect. In fact, I wasn't like 100% like babies are what I want. That was not me. Okay. Now I say that with two boys now, Charlie and Henry, who are the love of my life. And of course I adore them. And of course I love them. And I wouldn't take it any other way. But I was not on board as much as I let myself believe I was. I wore the mask of this is what you do. You have the babies and we need to have them fast. We need to have them now. And I had these two kids. And then the other thing is early baby, like little babies for me, I don't enjoy. I didn't enjoy at all. I stayed home. I quit my teaching job, which was a real big part of my identity. And also, I really loved it, but it was a real big part of my identity. So I was identityless. I was trying to be the perfect mom because I'm perfect everything else. And did you know, babies don't let you be perfect. Like they, in their contracts, try to F you up. Like that's their whole thing is to not let, life go as expected. And they mess with you, right? Um, so the early baby stage and the staying home and the isolation and all of that, And I was breastfeeding. I did all that. I was good. I learned how to pump and dump. So there were a couple times when I would drink and then dump, but the drinking I wasn't doing it. But I will tell you this, I was thinking about it. I was waiting. I was like, I can't wait until I can, do this again. And I would talk about it a lot with my friends and we would joke, can't wait till I can have a nice glass of wine or whatever. But it was on my mind all the time. And then as soon as both of those kids were off, no longer breastfeeding, my drinking went from 0 to 100. I was within, like, I try to remember kind of the progression. I went from a bottle a night to a Magnum to stealing my husband's really expensive scotch, and I didn't even like scotch, and going through it to getting the fancy vodka to finally just getting the plastic vodka and then hiding it and starting to hide it all around the house. I was hiding bottles of vodka upstairs in my closet in my boots because they were tall and I could put bottles in there. It was crazy. So really within probably a year, I went from 0 to 60. It was terrifying. And then that's when my boys were about a year or so. I know I got sober when Henry was 2, so we did this dance of Dana's alcoholism for a good solid 2 years.
Now, what
Um,
about Brian? Did he notice what was going
uh,
on?
Yes. Brian, bless his heart, is an engineer, so he's not he's really great, but he's not the most observant. So I was able to get away with a lot for a long time. And he also drank. So the best thing for me, like in the early days, the best thing ever would be to drink like half a bottle of wine and then time it just so he would walk in the door and I'd have half a glass. So I'd be like, "Hi, I just opened a bottle of wine. Would you?" Oh, no, actually, I would drink like almost a whole bottle. Yeah, I'd drink a whole bottle and then start a new one and have the half glass. So it was all like deception. And I'd be completely sloshed, but I was really good at like not looking completely sloshed. And I would do all those little tricks with him. And it was the best when I could get him to drink with me because then I would be off the hook and he would get his buzz on and I would just be plowed and he didn't even realize it that I had already like a whole bottle of wine prior and all of this. But then as time passed, it just starts to sink through the seams. Like you can't hide that. It doesn't, you think you can, I mean, alcoholics think that they can hide their alcoholism, but I was so convinced on the lie of vodka doesn't smell. Like I would drink vodka, so I'm like, oh, you can't smell it on your breath. That is a total lie. When you smell, like, I mean, the fumes coming off of me alone were enough. I don't know, you could have like lit a match around me and I would have exploded with all the booze that I was taking in. But
You
he
also
finally,
probably were like me and always thought you seemed fine. So if
oh,
anybody was like,
yeah.
"Are you
And then
okay?" You'd be like, "Yeah,
why?
why would you
And
possibly ask me that?"
why?
Like,
And you were you really weren't fine, but I did. I mean, I there's a story I tell in Perfect. That's the second book, and it's about the relapse, where I'm going to work and I'm hungover and I think everything's fine and no one can tell. And this is not in it's hard to explain. It was not during the relapse. It was just a memory from when my early drinking days where I was going into work and I was trying to get into my office and I couldn't get in. And I was like totally ticked off with my key. I'm like, what the hell? Did they change the locks? And then this professor comes around the corner and she's just staring at me. She goes, "Why are you trying to get into my office?" And I looked at her and I realized I was on the wrong floor and I was just being an idiot. And at the time, I'm like, oh, haha, these halls all look the same. Like, I didn't even allow myself to feel anything about that. I just thought, well, it's totally okay. Like, it's totally natural that you would be on the wrong floor and try your key when there's stuff on the door that revealed that it was Laurenelle's office. But at any rate, all of this was going on. My husband and I were increasing our fights. I joke and I say that was my telenovela era because I was just so freaking dramatic about everything. You couldn't talk to me without me bursting into tears or leaving the
same.
room.
Your whole
Oh,
story, by the way, I don't know. I feel like I'm at a meeting hearing like the best
yes.
speaker because everything you're saying is my life exactly.
Yeah.
Babies at
Isn't that
37 and
crazy?
40. Yeah. Never wasn't really on board with having kids. I
Oh
was
my gosh.
definitely in the, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. I kept asking my therapist at the time, uh, I just don't know if I want to have kids. Like, I know I don't want to
Yeah.
not
And
have
what's
them.
wrong with me for that?
What's
Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
with me? I don't feel secure and I don't feel like, yes, I know I don't, but I also don't feel that feeling of like, I really want a baby.
Yeah.
And she told me,
Everyone
like,
wants.
people just have them. That's just what you do. And so I did. But wait,
That's helpful.
but with you, but same with what you're saying, like a lot of that was fear because I'm
Yeah.
absolutely my daughter, my older daughter is 21 and just turned 21 and I'm obsessed with her. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
but after the baby years, for anybody that's listening, that's like, well, what happens when you don't love the baby stage? You just work on anxiety and
Yeah.
perfectionism and you
Yeah.
love them, but you're just
Yeah.
scared all the time that you're
I was
fucking
scared
them
all,
up.
and I had postpartum depression. I
Same.
had, yes, it's to the point where I was almost needed to be hospitalized. I was so anxious. I was terrified the children were going to die, but at the same time, I just wanted them to go away. Like, how can this
Oh
baby
my,
just go away?
yes.
Could I just make it go and like put it in a closet somewhere and then
Because
I
the
could have my day
finality,
back?
the
I was so,
finality
it
of
sounds so
having, yes,
awful.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, but it's true.
Because they can't go away. And you're just like, I remember that feeling,
Yeah.
just the brutal knowledge that there's no day off. Like,
Nope.
no one's taking these babies
Yeah.
at all, unless it's CPS, which no, we don't
Yeah.
want that to happen. But
We
you
don't
know what
want
I mean?
that. We
But
don't want
I mean,
that.
there's no vacation. There's no, also, I'm wondering, did
No.
you have, because I did not have a lot of family support at all,
No,
none.
I didn't.
So I
No, my
think that makes a
family was
huge
far
difference.
away.
I
Yeah.
never got breaks.
Yeah. And I remember one time, Brian, this is when Charlie, he's my firstborn. Charlie and I were sitting and nursing, and it was supposed to be this beautiful thing, and I had a hard time nursing, and it sucked and it hurt. And he comes
Same.
in and I'm crying, and he's like, Brian is a golden freaking retriever. Okay. Everything is easy for Brian. I did ask him once, I'm like, I wonder if you tried feeding Brian. That was tough. But everything is easy for him. And then also kids were pretty easy. He was never anxious. He never worried about stuff. And he just came in and his look on his face while I'm sitting there sobbing, where I'm supposed to be breastfeeding, it's supposed to be this beautiful moment. And I could tell he was just like, what the hell is happening with her? Like, this is not. And then I felt shame, horrible shame, because I was also going, like, I still remember this woman at my church that I was attending at the time came up to me and she's like, isn't having babies just beautiful? And I wanted to slap her. I was so angry because I was miserable
Yeah.
and postpartum and all of that. And the the thing that I missed through this whole time with the drinking and self-medicating and all of that was that deep down Dana had severe depression for 10 years probably, and I was not getting help for it. I was didn't even know I had it really. I didn't really know I had anxiety. That diagnosis came later, but I had squelched it for so long that, and I just kept thinking if I just do more or make my surroundings as peaceful and beautiful and perfect as possible, my house was a shrine, and babies mess that up too. Um, I just was really suffering, and it took me a long time. In fact, it wasn't even until this third book that I really came to terms with that because I just kept thinking there's got to be something else that's at play here, and it's not depression. I don't want it to be depression, so I'm going to make it be something else. And a good glass of wine solved. This is kind of scary to say, but for the longest time, drinking worked. Man, it worked so well in terms of self-medicating and taking away those feelings of sadness. And it worked until it didn't. And then by the time it stopped working for me, I was addicted. And so I don't want to say that with someone listening going, drinking worked. Yeah, not really. It's just a lie in the sense that if you're if you're drinking with strings attached, if you're drinking for a deeper reason, like I get people who drink to want to party or they just want to go get, take the edge off of a day or they want to go have fun with people and it's all up here, right? Your drinking is surface related, but if you're drinking because there's this deeper underlying thing, it's going to get you. It's going to come back and it's going to be a problem. So that's what happened to me. And I mean, basically through those first early baby years and straight up alcoholic drinking, to the point where my lowest low was this me looking at my kids going, I can't stop. I remember thinking this and feeling that for the first time in my life, I'd been able to solve every problem in my life. Get a job. Okay, I'll be the first one to do it. Get a house. Okay, I'm going to be the first one to get a house in my friend group. Be the best teacher. Yes, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this. Get this guy. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this guy. And for the first time in my life, I'm like, I can't solve this problem. I can't quit, but I mean, I can't physically quit. Like I wasn't able to physically quit at that point, and because I was also physically addicted at that point, but I also can't keep going. I know if I keep going, that's when I started planning my death because I just was like, well, I'm stuck, and I don't know what else to do about it. And I didn't even once think of quitting as really an option. It just seemed so completely not doable. Like the thought of quitting drinking was is like someone came up to me and said, "Hey, we're gonna go to Mars tomorrow." I'm like, "No, that's not possible. It's not gonna happen." So I would consider suicide instead. Like, isn't that kind of crazy? You start to get pretty crazy when you're pretty pickled at the end. So yeah.
What happened?
Okay. Well, it's kind of weird. What I don't know in terms of people's thoughts about higher powers, but my higher power kind of helped me out. No, he didn't kind of, he just really did. So here's what happened. I was like, okay, fine. Um, I'm gonna quit. I made this decision, but I'm not gonna quit right away. Oh, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I had started having these feelings of like, I'm gonna quit, or I have to quit, or I will quit, just not today, maybe on Monday, maybe I'll, whatever. I've been doing that for a year, like maybe even longer. It's so funny how when you have a basically intelligent woman who's pretty good at processing life and like living life, but the dumb thoughts. I'll do that on Monday. That was always my main excuse. And then I just put it off for like a year. I was living in this limbo of I'm gonna quit someday, but just not yet. But then I had done it again, and I was like, but I'm not gonna quit until Monday. And so this was on a Thursday, and I remember thinking, I'm gonna go to the liquor store and I'm gonna buy everything I've ever wanted. I'm gonna splurge and get all the really good stuff. I'm not gonna get the plastic vodka anymore. I'm gonna go and get all the good stuff. So I went to the liquor store and it was like that scene from, have you seen Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas
Yes.
Cage where he goes
Yeah.
into the liquor store and he's just like the happiest he could ever be. That scene really resonated with me, um, because I had that same euphoria. I was just in my zone and I loved the liquor store. Oh my God, all the bottles and the possibility, right? And so I was going down the aisles and getting all my stuff. And I brought it all home. And I still remember coming in with these two brown bags of clinking stuff. And I think, and this is hard to admit, but I think I had my kids with me. I would go to the liquor store often with my children, and that is a hard thing to admit, but I think I did. I think I did. And so walking down a liquor aisle with, a toddler and a baby is just really that's not a good look. But at that point in my life, I didn't care. And so brought them all in, set them on the counter. It was 3 o'clock. And at that point, I mean, I was always the one that's like, I won't drink in the morning. I won't drink until 5 o'clock. That just all changed. Um, that had been changing, into like, well, it's 11, it's brunch, it's okay. I can, I need something to get me through this next hour of little Einsteins. If I watch my child pound a plastic piece of plastic with a toy hammer for another 20 minutes. I'm gonna scream. So I brought all the bottles in, set them on the counter, was really excited. And I opened that first bottle of wine. I started with the wine, white wine was my thing, and poured a glass. And I took one sip and I fell to the ground. And I still don't know what happened. Um, I think it was some sort of an anxiety attack. I felt like I was dying. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. And at that moment, I was like, I think like I'm physically going to die. Um, I wasn't at that point in my drinking days to be dying from it. I wasn't, I didn't have liver disease. I knew what those signs were. Um, I wasn't even having like I did have the shakes in the morning, but not terribly. And I wasn't physical withdrawal from me wasn't that horrible. But so again, I say that because I want people to know like you don't have to be this shaking, barely crawling on the ground, throwing up blood kind of situation. You don't, and you can still be an alcoholic, okay? And so I fell to the floor and I was just laying there, and I remember somehow I couldn't really move or talk. I felt really inebriated, like to the point where you can't barely, even make a sentence. But somehow I got the phone and called Brian and said, I can't do this anymore. And I hung up on him. And Brian, to his credit, he is extremely literal. And so normally his MO at that point would be to be like, What? What are you talking about? What's going on? Like ask a billion questions. But he didn't. He just knew somehow to get home. And he got home. Um, and I was still sitting in the kitchen and he walked in and he gave me, I just never forget it. He gave me the sweetest, kindest, most gentle look. He tilted his head kind of to the side, kind of like the Labrador Retriever, and just looked so sad for me. And I looked at him and I said, I can't quit. And, this coming from a girl who had fixed her whole life into these perfect little, a quilt of perfection, to have this come up against me was just terrifying. But also, it was the greatest gift because it was like I was just able to finally go to someone else, not just to myself, say it out loud. I can't quit. I'm a failure at this. Like, I can't quit. And he didn't say anything. He was just silent. And then I go, but I'm not going to meetings. And then, of course, the next morning, somehow in just autopilot, not because someone was telling me to, he wasn't like, Are you going to a meeting? He didn't, he was very, I think Brian, and I've asked him about this before, but he's often said, I knew I couldn't get you to quit yourself. Like, he would take away the drinks and sometimes even hit him in our car. Like, he would do all that stuff and it didn't work. I just go out to the car and get him. I knew where he hit him. Um, but he kind of backed off and just let me work it out. And then at times I got kind of mad with him about it later. It's like, why didn't you make me go to rehab? Why didn't you like, get mad and threaten divorce or whatever? And he's like, I just knew you had to figure this out yourself. You were never going to quit if someone told you to. It would never stick. Um, and I said, what if it had gotten really bad? Like, what if it was really to the point where I had to have an intervention or I had to do rehab? And he's like, well, we never got there. So we're just not gonna, we did it our way and this is what happened. So the very next morning I started going to meetings and, I walked in and I always talk about this guy that I saw that had a spider web tattoo on his head and he looked really
You're like, my
scary.
people.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't belong. I'm in my little Juicy Couture, like velvet track suit thing, this is
Right.
the 2000s. And I was in pink, and it just felt, and this cigarette smell and like all of that, the walls were like brown. It was a really not an attractive AA meeting. Aesthetically, no. And I just remember thinking, this is hell. I don't belong here. And then that man started talking. And I just sat there and these big hot tears just started going like this. And I didn't do anything. I didn't wipe them away. I just let them fall. And he spoke my life. And we're totally different. And yet we're still totally the same. And it was powerful. And that man, that sweet man at the end of it, I was walking out and he stopped me and he goes, I want to give you something. And he gave me his first chip that he got at a meeting. And it's white. It'll be a white 24 hours chip. And I got that from him and I still have it. And it just was amazing. So I I I will never forget that first group that I started going to in the firehouse. And I didn't keep going there. I did find a meeting where there was a little bit more of people that look like me, like in terms of women and moms and things like that. So
I
that's what I
remember
started
my
doing.
first meeting, I just kept saying to my friend who brought me, I was just like, who was not a mom. I was like,
Yeah,
are there going to be moms there?
I know.
I
So
need there to be
important.
moms. And then in the very
Yeah.
first meeting, it was a mixed meeting, which
Yeah.
means for lay people, it means there's men and women.
Yes.
So, but there were a couple of moms. And
Yeah.
then I started going to women's meetings where there were like tons of moms.
Yeah. And that's such a, I mean, that's when you really are able to lean into each other and get the straight dope. Finding those stories. I mean, that's the whole thing with me and the reason I keep trying to think about it. Like, why did I drink? Why did I do that so much? There was a hole. I was always searching for something. My perfectionism, I want the love is currency thing, like wanting to find that love that would answer all my questions and make me feel right. Even my marriage to Brian, initially when I first met him, I'm like, that's it. Like I found the answer and here's where I'm gonna be. And it's gonna answer all the questions in my life. Well, spoiler alert, marriage is great, but it doesn't answer all the questions in your life. It's not, that's too much pressure to put on one person. But I was just always looking for some big, huge kerthunk, to come along and go, like the doink doink in that, what are those CSI shows that goes dun dun, Law and
Yeah,
Order.
Law and
I
Order.
wanted that, and I never got it. And I think through drinking, I tried to find that answer, but drinking just created more questions in my life, honestly. So,
So you start going to meetings, it
yes,
sounds like you're working the steps. Tell me about though, as a writer,
yeah,
what was the first time that, you started writing about it, or what was
yeah.
the first time that you were more public about your drinking outside of meetings?
Well, I'd wanted to be a writer my whole life, but I didn't write for years and years and years, because I didn't want it. It wasn't perfect enough. I couldn't get, Um, so I don't remember if we talked about this. I did relapse 3 years later. And there's actually something to be said for the number three in terms of recovery. I believe in this, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that whole thing. There's something about three, and I made it to 3 years, and I can remember one of the guys in my group going, Dana, 3 years is a big deal. Be careful. And I'm like, what? Well, there was a relapse. It was a brief relapse. It was over the winter holiday. Um, I was, I remember the kids had come home for Christmas break and all of that, and that's basically when I did it. It was, I think, over 2 weeks' time, and it was a very quick descent into hell. I will tell you this, you'll hear a lot in recovery how if you do relapse, you pick up right where you left off, and it just goes off the rails. It did. I was blacking out. I was doing all the stuff that I told myself I wouldn't do. It was severe. And from that relapse and getting back into recovery and fighting my way back in that year that followed, which was tough, man. My first recovery, we talk about the pink cloud, where you do get these moments of like illumination and clarity and beauty and joy that are just sharp and transcendent and amazing. The pink cloud did not show up after my relapse, really. It was a slog. It was tough because I had to work through some stuff still. And through that year where I was slogging through, I was going kind of crazy, and that's when I started writing. And so I started actually querying some magazines and saying, I'm sober, and I would, I'm a mom and I'd like to write about it. And strangely enough, people were really interested and they wanted to hear about it. And I think the other thing they liked about my writing was that it's not all serious. It's not a drunkalog. I'm not a fan of the drunkalog. I feel like we can go into those depths and get really it can be really depressing, and I wanted to show some hope and some humor, and so I started writing, and then because of that, I got a book deal for Bottled. It was kind of a miracle. I'll never forget when they called me. It was through a publisher called Central Recovery Press, and they just publish recovery people, books and things like that. And the woman I was talking to, I finally went through the whole conversation with her, and she's like, "We'd like you to write a book for us," because I had an article that had been picked up by HuffPost. They really liked it and said, and because of that, CRP found me. And the conversation ends, and I look at her and I'm like, "Am I getting punked? Is this like, is this all fake? Did you just do this to mess with me?" Because it was a dream. It was a dream come true, and I got that book deal, and then from that, they wanted me to write a three-piece set of memoirs about recovery with women and mothers. And so I wrote Perfect. How to Be Perfect Like Me is the next one. So, and then I have another one coming out.
And your new one is
Yeah.
called,
Humble Pie, and it has a long title, but I like to call it Humble Pie. But here's the long title. It's called Humble Pie, Sober Menopause, Sugar Addiction, and the Sweetness of Recovery. And it's actually with a new publisher. I'm with Bloomsbury now, and Humble Pie has quite the story attached to it. Um, it took me 6 years to get this book out, and it started as soon as I published How to Be Perfect Like Me. I'm like, okay, I need to write another one. CRP wants another book. Well, I left that publisher, and then for a variety of reasons. Um, and then there was just this, I've got to write a book. I've got to write a book. And I couldn't write it. Literally could not write it. It was awful. Um, and then all these things started happening. One was a global pandemic occurred. And during that time with COVID, I also became menopausal, and I didn't know it because I wasn't going to the doctor, because I was terrified of going to the doctor. And my symptoms were very COVID-y, which a lot of people just think menopause, they just think hot flashes. I'm like, oh no, oh no. There's so many other things that happen. Like I was having hearing loss, I was having weird bouts with nausea and flu-like symptoms and all this stuff. Um, and so that started, and menopause really, really took me back to my drinking days. Some of the symptoms made me feel like I would be up at 4 a.m. walking around because I was having anxiety panic attack big time and couldn't breathe. And I'm like, all of this reminds me. There's this long hallway at the top of our house, and I would go down the long hallway, and out this window at the end of the hall, there's a little church, and I could see through the church. There's a steeple and the stained glass window of a little angel, and I would stare at that angel as a drunk woman, desperate for help and desperate to quit but couldn't. And then the same kind of crap was happening. Like I'd be staring at that angel as a menopausal sober woman, but still feeling like this is like those hangover days. This is like those desperate days where I feel so stuck. Um, and I started thinking, what is menopause doing to my recovery? And it took me into some dark areas. It took me into something called process addictions, which are like those sneaky little things that show up after you give up the big biological addiction. There's other addictions that come in, like food or gambling or shopping. Addicts, addiction needs a place to hide in anyone. And if you kick it out in one way, it'll come back in another. And so while I was menopausal, I severely became addicted to sugar and binging out on food and just horrible behavior in terms of that. And I kept telling myself, this should sound familiar, it's not a big deal. It's just Reese's cups. It's just food. It's not booze. And I would do the same crap. I would hide Reese's wrappers underneath my mattress so that my kids couldn't find them, and I would feel shame. And I was like, I had to square up with food and go, I'm behaving the same way that I did back when I was drinking, and it's making my soul sick, and I've got to stop. So I worked through a lot of that, and I wrote the book kind of at the same time, which is crazy. A lot of times when you go through something, you go through it and then you write about it. But in my
tragedy
case,
plus time.
oh my gosh, like I love the process. I just wrote and wrote and wrote through it, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
and made the book. So I'm
So that's
excited.
great. So it comes out the date it comes out.
January 8th, and it is
Okay.
available everywhere for, oh, I shouldn't say this. Never mind. That's so
Why?
hacky. Well, I'm trying. I was like, it's available for pre-order. Sorry, it's just like automatic now. I say it to
That's
everyone.
what we're here to do. Please pre-order
Okay.
Dana's book. It
Yeah.
sounds so good. I'm going to pre-order it.
Yeah.
The more
Yeah.
pre-orders, the better. It looks better for her publishing
It
company.
does. It helps. Yes. Yes, I totally agree. So
Well, I am so excited. So, how many years of sobriety do you have right now?
I have 14 years. I'll be 15 on January 1st, and I'm
That's
excited.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I quit drinking 2009,
Yep.
May 22nd, 2009.
Yeah.
Um, I never had a relapse, but I relate to
Yeah.
everything else, the sugar, the that's been an ongoing struggle for me,
Yeah.
the behavior
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, like, I'm going through something hard right now and not eating sugar, not drinking, not doing anything. I've never
I
felt
know.
more of my feelings at the surface,
Ugh.
constantly like bursting into tears.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something nice about it because even though it sucks and what I'm going through really sucks, but I feel like at least I'm actually going through it and then I will
Yeah.
have gone through it instead of using
Aroused.
substances. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, yeah.
the feeling is there to like binge on chocolate cake that's left
Yeah.
over in my refrigerator from my
Numb
daughter's
it out.
birthday.
Numb
And
it out.
I'm just like, but then I think it through and I go, well, then I won't feel these feelings that I'm feeling, which
Yeah.
are valid and real and something I need to get through
Yeah.
to get to the other side. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I love this conversation.
Yay.
Dana Bowman, go get her new book. You could pick up her old Bottled was out in
Yeah.
2015
Yep.
and How to Be Perfect Like Me, and then the new one that's coming out. Thank you so much
Yay.
for being
This was
here.
an honor. I really loved talking with you. It was so fun, Stephanie.
And could we go to your website? Do you have a website where
Yes,
everything's
I have a
listed?
website, Dana Bowman Creative, and then you can follow me there. You can follow me at the Dana Bow on all my handles. So yeah.
Okay, I will put that in the description of the show.
Yay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Okay, bye
you.
everybody. See you next week.
Life is good, life